The words you use have enormous personal power. Stay tuned to learn how to harness that. Today on Talk Shop, we get to sit down and have a chat with Mark England, an expert in how to use language to improve performance and well-being. He's here to help us learn about the magic in language and how to choose words that will help empower and enlift us. Mark England is an international speaker, coach, and trainer specializing in the power of language as a driver for performance and well-being. As a TEDx speaker and the co-founder and lead coach of Enlifted, he's worked with high-performance individuals and organizations around the world to help them achieve their goals and fulfill their intentions. Mark holds a master's degree in international education, and he continues to engage in his passions for travel, dance, and martial arts. So, Mark, you are the language guy. And I would love for you to tell us a little bit about how you got into language and how it relates to our performance, because you do have a rather fascinating story.
Well, I just want to start off by saying I'm offended because I'm a language geek. Okay. Not a guy. I'm a language geek. I got that moniker by accident so TEDx RVA, they did 5 events and I was friends with some of the people that produced it. And I got on the last one. And middle of the day, my friend Leah, she sent me a message. How would you like to be introduced? And I said, I just wrote back, I said, language geek. I was kidding. She didn't know I was kidding. So they entered, you can see it on the YouTubes. They introduced me as a language geek, which is, it's true. You know, geeking, nerding, dorking, all of that really comes down to how strongly you can focus on something. You can maintain your focus on something for
Yep.
prolonged periods of time. And when I've fallen in love, Lauren, and thank you for having me on the show, by the way. I've
It's an
fallen in love on site twice. First was with jujitsu in 1996. And second was when I saw what we can call story work for the first time in 2003. I went to a seminar. I laughed at the title because I'm very involved. Emotional detoxification. I'm like, emotional detox. I was living in Thailand. Moved over there in 2002. Thought I was a tough guy for the Thai boxing. My knee fell off for the second time. Knee surgery.
It just
Dark
dropped
business.
right onto the floor. Just boom.
Yeah, it just fell over. It's just like I'm walking along and my leg fell off. And so after a year of not laughing and entrenching, which we will talk about by definition, a entrenching of victim mentality, I went down to the spa and on an island in the Gulf of Thailand where they were doing cleanses, these 7 day pay to not eat. Here's some herbal pills and a coconut. Thanks for $700. Great gig for them. It was a great gig for us too, because it was just so weird and it worked. And one night, this guy who turned into my mentor was doing an emotional detoxification workshop. And guess what he talked about? He talked about words and stories and identity and breath. Stuff I had never heard before. Made perfect sense because he explained it in a simple way. Um, Things that I would have it would have benefited me a lot to learn them at some point in time in my formal education. Most people's education about language, and when I refer to language, I'm talking about our internal dialogue and our external dialogue, what we think, what we say, what we write. Most people's education about their language comes down to traditional spelling, grammar, and definitions. There's just a little bit more to it than that.
Yep.
And then so he front loaded it, and then he asked, so I am on a roundabout way answering your initial question of how I turned into this person that relentlessly talks. I'm almost at 300 podcasts. This is 298 podcasts that I've been on. I've been doing this work full time, somewhere between full time and overtime the whole time for 15 years.
You do this a lot.
Yeah, I do. It's a fact. He asked if anyone was hung up on a story. And this young woman shot her hand up and said, I am. And he asked her what the story was. And she told the story 3 times. First time he let her go. Just tell it, normal and normal rate of speech, all the words, and it was this this legit bad breakup story. So her and all her friends get a house down at the beach for beach week. Her boyfriend and all his friends get the house right next to it for beach week. Okay. Add alcohol, press play, and you got Jerry Springer. And he hooked up with her best friend in front of everybody one night and then dumped her in front of everybody the next night. Can we say ouchie on three?
Yeah, that's some reality TV stuff right there.
Yeah, for sure. I'd watch that. And she was 4 years later, she hadn't gotten in a relationship. She's still upset, still taking it personally. And then he had her play to get, so first time through, angry and tears. Second time through, telling that same story, he started to make some adjustments in the language, and you could see her body posture loosen up and her breath loosened up. She sounded a little bit different, and now she was sad, no tears. And then the third way through, he stopped her at the Lord of the Rings sentence, which was had her repeat it a few times. He clocked it from the start. He had to repeat it, so she's staring at that sentence and everybody else is staring at that sentence. That spell, can we call it a spell? Which we can by definition, not mine, Webster's. The
Absolutely.
definition of a spell is a word or a combination of words of great influence. That's it. And it can go both ways. Expansive spells, sure. Constrictive spells, sure. And this was her sentence. He did that to me. He did that to me. And he had her say it three. He did that to me. Everybody got it? Yeah. At the end of that sentence, take out me and put in himself. And it was such a radical departure from her the story she'd been telling herself. It was half a sentence. It was clunky, and it went up at the end with up talk. He did that to himself, and then you see it catch.
Yeah.
The breath goes, he did do that to himself. And then she starts telling another part of the story, which she didn't have access to because she was so emotionally blocked with the victim thing. And it was, oh yeah, he, a lot of people stopped being his friend and he looked like a fool. And you know what? And then she goes, it was never going to work out anyway. The guy was actually kind of weird. 10 minutes earlier, she was crying about this dude.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, that's not my story, because I had people to blame for my knee injury, my second knee injury. That guy he shouldn't have been kicking that hard when we were warming up, and all. Like I had all the villains, including my lineage, because so I thought I was a tough guy. I wrestled in high school, got into jiu-jitsu, fought MMA, won a couple of state kickboxing titles, was going to go over there for a year, come back, go pro. And I didn't. I ended up staying over there. First year, train came off the track. I stayed over there for 10 years. And I used that experience as proof. So one of your questions was, how do people deal with distractions, or something along the lines of distractions, procrastination, distractions? Facebook notifications got nothing on the victim mentality. Yeah. You talk about something that'll hijack your reticular activating system, your awareness, and stay gone with it. I used that fail, which was the biggest fail in my life at that time in the way I was seeing it, as proof. It was the final damning piece of evidence in a case that I was making against myself, secretly in my mind, that something was wrong with me and I was doomed to fail, and I was not good enough. The telephobia, the fear of not being good enough. There's an actual word for it. Look it up.
Yep.
And so getting myself into that situation, and then finally getting sick of myself being in that situation, going on a little bit journey of, I'll try something else. Because I looked down that path of playing, and let's get this on the table real fast too, everybody. There's a big difference between victim blaming and victim mentality explaining. Those are two very different things.
Enormously different concepts.
Enormously different. One, you're pointing at the person. The other one, you're pointing at the book. Okay. And I'll recite for the umpteenth, 100th time the definition of the victim mentality soon enough. And so finally I got tired of the story I was telling myself. I said, if I keep telling the same story, and I didn't have the part about the words yet, then I'm going to be bitching about this when I'm 55, when
Yeah.
I'm 60. And if you're complaining about, I said, Mark, if you're complaining about this woulda, shoulda, coulda been thing that never happened, the fighter that could have been, when you're 55, then you really are a loser. I said, that's real. That's true. I'll take anything with that. So I went and did a bunch of weird stuff. And like I said, fell in love on site, and I've been in the game since.
It's amazing, that story that you were telling about the woman with the bad breakup. Those small tweaks to language, because words have an enormous amount of power, how they can show up in different areas. And to go slightly off my initial plan here, one of the similar tweaks that I will do within corporate clients, especially people who are struggling with communicating up the ladder, is they'll be saying, I need boss to do this. I need boss to understand this in order to get where I want to go. I need them. They put all of the power up on the person above them in the org chart or in the org hierarchy. And a reframing in terms of their language that I get them to do is, instead of I need them to, why won't they just? I'll say they need me to do this. They have to make a decision. They have to take an action. They need me to give them this information in order for them to do their job. And that can create a huge shift in terms of people's mindset and power within an organization, how they conceive of power, how they see how they need to behave towards people in power, how power works. It's incredible what those small shifts in our vocabulary can do. So, to riff on that a little bit more, by your view, what role does language play in our identity? You touched on that regarding having victim mentality. But when we're speaking to ourselves, when we're telling ourselves our story, how does our language and our vocabulary affect the way that we conceive of ourselves as people?
Our language, that's a very legit, that's a great, great language ninjaing reframe, if you want to get uh, um, helping them see what they need to do so they can go first, as opposed to waiting for the phone call. Those are two very different types of people: the person that's waiting for the phone call, and the person that picks up the phone and makes the call themselves in some form or fashion. um, how does our language influence our identity? Well, it depends on what your definition of identity is. So Webster's definition of identity is the fact of being who or what a person is. And it's quite easy to dispel, which means to cast out, that definition. We did it on stage at TEDx. I asked everybody, raise your hand if you see yourself differently in any way now than when you were 5. And it's such a ridiculous question. When you give it half a second of thought,
Mhm.
it got a big guffaw from the audience, which is what we were expecting. And so, what that tells me when I look at it, my identity is not a fact. Okay, it's not static. It is an ongoing, fluid, flexible process that I participate in. See, we're all telling ourselves a story to ourselves about ourselves, which is the enlifted definition of mindset. It's the story you tell yourself to yourself about yourself. And most people have little to no training in how to get their language working for them, as in how to use my words, internal and external dialogue, thoughts, speech, writing, to stay focused on the things that are important to me, keep the drama low, build up my self confidence in the feels, and create, let's just go with a half decent picture of myself in my imagination. Most people, they do not know how to do that. Negation acknowledged with their words. And with a little amount of training, you can start making some seemingly minor adjustments to your everyday ordinary language, and watch the pictures change, and watch the energy change, watch your posture change. Okay. And very important, you can watch you'll owe the many benefits of unlocking the breath. Most people's language puts them and keeps them in a sympathetic nervous system response, stress response, breath trapped up here. And whether you're going out on a first date or you're giving a presentation to upper management, or you're on a sales call, or you are trying to be an effective leader, if you deliver from your chest, which is where most people deliver from, you're going to sound like an amateur, regardless of where you find yourself in the rankings of a whatever. And so most people's language is working against them, unbeknownst to them, and it's tricking them into. So just like you mentioned earlier, Lauren, what was the exact what do I need? When will
I need
management?
them. I need
Right,
management to do this, or I need management to understand this so
right,
that they can do this thing that I need,
right, right.
versus they need me so that they can do their job. They need me to give them this information so that they can get what they have to do done.
Most people's language tricks them into being innocent bystanders
Yeah.
in their story, being spectators in the stands, and that in and of itself is depressing and stressful. And so when you are practicing using your words differently, it dawns on you that I mean, what's more empowering than getting control over the story, your story? It's foundational, and it's something that anybody can do quickly.
Well, you have a great handle with that too, by which you kind of summarize all of this. And it was such a good bit of our pre-interview conversation. So I'd like to bring it in here. Tell our listeners and our viewers about abracadabra.
Was living down in Ecuador, as you do from time to time.
As you do.
As you do. I lived in Vilcabamba, up in the mountains, Andes, southern tip of the Andes Mountains of Ecuador for about a year and a half. And this is in 2013. I was out to dinner with some friends, and one of the guys at the table knew what I did, knew what I was into. And he goes, "Hey, Mark, you know what abracadabra means?" And I'm like, yeah. Magic. He goes, "No. Abracadabra is Aramaic, and it translates to with my word I create, or with my word I influence. Hair on the arms, hair on the back of the neck." I went over there and asked him. I put my fork down and I said, "Dude, tell me everything." And he goes, "Yeah, the some people back in the day, call them teachers, would triangulate abracadabra and wear it around their neck to remind them of the power and the mechanism of the spoken word. And they also believed that it dispelled, which once again means to cast out, negativity." And I've got a jeweler. I've actually got a jeweler. William Author Jewelry on IG. Look him up. He's quite awesome. And I had a solid silver abracadabra pendant made, which I wear around my neck to remind me of the power.
That's some serious language bling.
It's language bling. Language bling. And that's, I think, in my personal and professional opinion, Lauren and audience, abracadabra is the most well-recognized word on the planet.
Mm-hmm.
And I did this. Before COVID, I was a traveling salesman. 5 different continents. You can go almost anywhere and say abracadabra, and everybody goes to magic. Okay. And then when people learn about, I've been watching this for years. People learn about what abracadabra actually means. Something comes on, an extra little light bulb, or maybe not so little, comes on. Okay. And it gives a more context to the conversation. It's also the best place to start the conversation with kids. Okay. So I was an elementary school sports teacher before I got into this strange line of work. And which is actually where my communication, when people ask me, "When did you start paying attention to words and communication?" I was like, well, actually, when I was an elementary school sports teacher. And if you can take, here's when you know you got it. If you can take 20 nuclear level excited second graders. They're about to go swimming across campus. Get them over there into the dressing room, dressed out, swim the lesson. Everybody survives free swim. Get them back into the thing with all their stuff. The buttons are on the right thing, and then you get them over to the predetermined place at the time that you're supposed to have them. If you can do that, then you know you got it. And bring up abracadabra with hey kids, you know what abracadabra means? Yeah, magic. No, it's even better than that. And so start the conversation early. I got two nieces. I got an 18-year-old niece and a 11-year-old niece. I've been talking to them for as long as they can remember about this stuff on and off, and cool things are happening with them.
Hmm.
They're way more mature than I was at those ages. That's quite the gift, you know.
That
Because
is, I love the notion that translation of it, of with my words I create. Because again, it's, you have power, you have power over your own words. Those are things that we consciously choose, or at least that we can learn, to your point, that we can learn to consciously choose. um and making those choices can be a little bit tricky. A lot of people don't know how to do this. And an item that I find happens a lot, particularly in the workplaces, particularly in corporations, and the higher up you get in levels of responsibility, oddly enough, is ambiguity within the language. And I think part of that is that those who know how to use ambiguity well, or at least those who are accustomed to using it in order to dodge responsibility, use it for precisely those reasons. It can become a little bit of a covering your butt behavior, or a refusal to commit to a thing when we become really ambiguous in your language. But I'm curious, that's the approach that I tend to take with ambiguity. How do you define it? How do you define ambiguity in language?
that's that's a great question. I had to look up the definition of ambiguity. I did an hour ago.
You
Like I said,
carry Webster's dictionary right up there, man. What are you talking about?
yeah, but it's selective.
I
You
gotcha.
know, it's selective, and it's it retains what it retains.
Yeah.
So, and I'm still unclear. This is not a pun. This is not a joke about what ambiguity is. I understand um what confusion and distortion and opaqueness is, or lack of clarity is with someone's language. When we're talking about ambiguity, is it people that are using it consciously to dodge responsibility, let's say like political rhetoric, or are we talking about someone who just can't seem to make decisions and they'd like to, they're struggling with it?
Both.
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 Yeah, so
Because
whenever you
both create the
hear,
same problem
yeah,
with the people
whenever,
who are listening to them.
fair enough, fair enough. Whenever you hear we need, we need to, whenever you hear a politician say we, and everybody does
Yeah.
it, both sides, whatever, we need to usually translates to I want. So we need to have more whatever.
Yeah.
Usually translates to uh, I, I singularly, or us over here. Me and my buddies want this.
Hmm.
Um, and a lot of people get, I'm sure there's a technical name for it. I don't know what it is though. They get trapped by the broad stroke generalizations of political rhetoric. So they'll trap you like this: as Americans, we don't.
Yeah.
Or as Canadians, we do. And then some part of you, maybe it's not a small part of you, depending on your emotional and also depending on where you're breathing. If you all want to become way less easy to manipulate and scare, get your breath down in your abdomen, low and slow, and keep it there. So part of it, like, look at the news. The news is a relentless barrage of stuff that you have zero control over, that is kind of freaky, and then they try to sell you stuff in between the fear sessions. Okay, because people you can get them to jump when they're breathing poorly.
Hmm.
And so some part of me, I am an American, so as an American, we don't. Since I'm American, and I mean that you got me in that part of the category, and they just gently walk you down a place, and then you're going like this for whatever. I mean, like I said, both sides do it. They pay the smartest, most highly sought after social psychologists and script writers to
Yep.
craft their speeches down to the word. They know exactly what they're doing. Okay, weaponized language at spelling magic. The definition of magic is the ability to alter it's the ability to apparently alter the course of events using supernatural forces. It's not the ability to do it, it's the apparent ability to do it. And someone that's super slick with their words, you can make all kinds of stuff happen for better and for worse. Now when it comes down to the person that just can't seem to make decisions well, or they're suffering with prolonged bouts of indecision, which is an absolute Baskin Robbins 31 flavors of stress.
Yep.
That's soft talk. That's soft talk, 100%. So
What does soft talk sound like?
soft talk, here's the keywords, and this also in some of the questions that you sent me prior. I have been on a lot of podcasts, and I've been talking about this for a while. And a lot of times people say, what do we do? Where do we start? And the answer is always soft talk. It's the gateway drug to the rest of your language because it's fun, it's funny, and when you scratch the surface, it gets deeper, and it's very easy to practice. So there are about 10 soft talk keywords, and I'll answer your question directly. What does soft talk sound like? Like this is what soft talk sounds like. I think I'm drinking too much coffee, or maybe I need to be more patient with my wife. Or this is one of my favorites. It's almost like I'm procrastinating. Or
Yep.
I guess I'm drinking too much. Or I probably would get better results if I was more consistent. So the keywords: think, like, maybe, sort of, kind of, probably, possibly, uh, um, one day, hopefully, try. Did I say guess? That's almost all of them.
They're all a
And
refusal to commit. Every single one of those means that you know the idea, you know the thing, but you're refusing to commit to it.
it's sometimes it's that, and sometimes it's worse than that, or equally as bad in just a different direction. Because it's one thing to use those keywords consciously to skirt responsibility, also be ambiguous, which political rhetoric they do that.
Yep.
And those words very frequently are littered in people's language, and unbeknownst to them, it gets in the way of them becoming solid when it comes to a decision that they know they need to make and following through. And if someone is having problems, there's a reason I just went upstairs. If someone is having problems making decisions and following through, and they repeat that over a period of time, then inevitably some parts of them identifies themselves wrongly in a static way as I'm just indecisive.
Yeah. Yeah. I've noticed that quite a bit too. Oh, look at that. That's what you went to get.
I just bought 10 more of these this morning.
It's right there. I will put all of these words in the description and show notes. They come up very frequently. These are words that I drill with my clients as well, especially when they're learning about how to speak confidently. In other words, how to give other people the intentional impression that you are feeling confident, whether or not you are. First thing is that you have to eliminate those words. You have to. And the incredible thing is that the brain will follow. Oh, I am committing. I'm not trying to be indecisive. This is something that I know. And it really does create an enormous shift. Now, this actually flows quite nicely into the next little bit. So, of course, people who listen to this show are very interested in tools and techniques that they can apply in life, at the workplace for sure. I generally focus on the application of communication in our business and our work, but life overall. And I would love to get kind of a few rapid fire tools that you yourself use for some performance related language stumbling points. So react how you would react. How does language affect procrastination? How can and what can we do about that? What can we do language wise about procrastination?
Same thing. This
Same
is the
thing.
answer. This is
Yep.
this right here. These soft talk keywords, folks. I'm going to mail you one of these, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
Is of course is so I'll read these out again for those. Probably, feels like, guess, maybe, could, might, possibly, sort of, kind of, hopefully, try, one day, should, and almost like. Those things are going to keep you in a state of indecision. My favorite quote about indecision is from Malmodius. I prefer the fear of making the wrong decision to the terror of indecision. And yeah, right? Perfect.
Beautiful.
Nailed it.
Nailed it.
Nailed it. So if you are procrastinating, and you know everybody knows when they're procrastinating, it's because it's got a very special feel to it. Start staring at your words. Start staring at your words. And if you want to have way more success when it's stare at my words time, pick up a pen and write down what you're thinking, because it's a million trillion. That's a legitimate metric. I Googled it. Times easier to observe your language once it's on paper.
Yeah.
Once it's in your head, most people are just way too busy believing it because, hey, it's my own voice in my own head. It's got to be right. Now, you don't even have a draft to hand in. Until your words hit paper, you don't even have a draft to hand in, much less edit.
And I'm going to dial that one more level up. Write it down and then say them out loud. Full voice, no whisper. Say them out loud while you look at them. That makes you confront your words. And it can rattle some people.
And I'm going to one up that one.
Please do.
And once you've said it, once you've verbalized what you've written, slow down, read it again 30% slower than your normal rate of speech, and you're going to bump up into some things.
Yep. See, this is what I was excited about today.
Yep. And that's another tool that people can use immediately in the workplace when it comes to communicating well. So most people speak too fast. And when someone slows down their rate of speech, the magic number is 30% when you want to get really introspective with your words and you're by yourself and all that stuff, and drop it by 20% when you are presenting or you are having a crucial conversation, or you are there to inspire and lead. Maintain it at about 20% or 80% of your normal rate of speech. That's going to unlock your breath to a tangible degree, and it's also going to give you more space to go high and go low when you need to, because some people, you're going to capture their imagination by getting all excited about things and getting going in up, and then some people really like it when you drop down low and make a slower point. And most people, because and due to a lack of preparation, this comes back to preparation. Most people do not prepare when it's time to talk, present, whatever. So they're stressed and then they're talking fast. And when you're talking, I'm just going to say things until something lands. Have fun.
Oh God.
Yeah. And so take out the soft talk, cut your soft talk usage back, slow down your rate of speech, a pinch, and watch.
Okay. Love it. So same idea. How can we use language to deal with distraction?
Yeah, distraction, there's different degrees of that, of course. And part of that answer is the same thing that you and I have already spoken about, right? Have a journaling practice of some sort. I don't know anyone that says, I journal a lot and it sucks. That's why I keep doing it. Right.
I'm looking for mine. It's somewhere around here.
Yeah. And distractions, most people, when they think of distractions, they think of Facebook notifications. Okay. That's nothing. That's a fart in the wind. Okay. You know what the real distracting stuff is? She never lets me think for myself,
Mm.
or he's always interrupting me, or I need them to respect me. You want to talk about, because guess what? The more inflammatory the statement is, the higher the emotional response and charge to the statement is, the more victim villain centric the statement is, and projections win that conversation,
Yeah.
then the more you're going to be distracted, the more of your mental real estate is going to get hijacked by it, and the longer you're going to stay riding that thought train to hell in context to what you could be doing.
Yeah.
Okay. Because guess what? It's hard to focus on two things at the same time. And it's really hard to focus, or it's really easy to focus because you can, there's different angles. It's really easy to focus on stuff when you're upset. I'm not saying you're going to like focusing on it. Some people do, by the way. There are professional victims out there, or people that are so addicted to their victim mentality that any departure from it, they'll go off the cliff in a flaming car with a trailer with everybody else in it, rather than change course and admit they're wrong. That's real too. They're known as unsalvageable victims, by the way, and there's about 2% of them, 2 to 3% of them, which is oddly enough the same number that there are psychopaths and sociopaths in the general population of society.
Mm-hmm.
And guess where those people go? The very top of politics. You think I'm kidding? I'm not kidding. And so it's you want, if you, so going back to what I said, most people's language working against them, this has nothing to do with intelligence. Einstein and Mark England can just as easily believe she walked out on me. Yeah. And if Einstein or Mark England continues to believe that, it has nothing to do with intelligence. Okay, smart people and dummies believe this stuff just as much as everybody else. Okay, and if you learn how to turn the volume down on the victim mentality, the more that you stay focused on what's important to you, the better your life is going to be. Mm-hmm. All right. And the fastest way to hijack, distract yourself, is by creating the victim villain mental imagery. Is this a great place for me to recite the definition of the victim mentality?
Sure, go for it.
Cool. The victim mentality is an acquired personality trait where a person it's a tendency, they tend to regard himself or herself as the victim of the negative actions of others, even in the absence of clear evidence. The victim mentality depends on a habitual thought process and attributions. That second sentence is right between the eyes, right where it belongs. The victim mentality depends, as in it has to have a habitual thought process. Habitual accurately implies duration and addiction. So yes, we can get addicted to our victim mentalities. Most people do. I definitely was. And you can also slow that thing down and free yourself from mental slavery. Shout out to Bob Marley. And your life will improve, and your breath will unlock. People don't like being around people that are always complaining and telling victim stories and gossiping. You're going to get yourself into a very unfun fraternity or sorority of people at work. Go find the gossipers and have lunch with them every day. Watch what happens to your career.
Yeah, and that's typically an enormous source of distraction as well.
For sure.
Totally pulls you away from what you're supposed to be doing, but it fires up, like you said, that fires up that sympathetic nervous system, gets all those juices flowing, and then we entrench in there.
Yeah, now you're majorly distracted, and that's where a lot of the unsalvageable victims reside, at the gossip table.
Yep. Next word, overwhelm. Using language to deal with overwhelm. What are your thoughts on that?
Options work. So overwhelm, there's a linguistic component to overwhelm, and there's of course there's the energy of it, and then there's also, and they're all intertwined. When someone is overwhelmed, they're staring at a huge, massive problem picture. Okay. And let's just say overwhelm. Um, they've got things to do, or they've got a big decision to make. The fastest way that I know of to uh, turn the volume down and eventually dispel overwhelm, write down what your options are. If you've got a big decision to make, the last person I interacted with um, on a public forum, one of our quarterly workshops, this woman had a decision to make about how she was going to proceed with the divorce with her husband, and her decision was directly going to influence their two teenage kids.
Mm-hmm.
And I asked her, have you written down your options? Most people say no. So guess what? That's the first thing you do. Write down what your options are. I'm not saying the ones that you want, okay? Even though, yes, that will be there too. Write them down singularly in full sentences, from the least likely to the most likely, or the scariest to the least scary, whatever they are. Get them all on paper and start there you go. And then if you take it far enough, or if you just got a bunch of stuff to do, okay, write down all the things that need to get done. It's called chunking it down, and start taking action. Okay, take some small actions. Action dispels overwhelm. That's where I was meandering to.
Where you were getting to. Well, and it's very true. One of the things I find about really making use of our words and of our language is that when people keep it inside, when they keep it in their head, when they don't write it down, when they don't say it out loud, they're generally not focused on the thing, they're focused on the feeling it creates. And that means that the thing goes unidentified. But that practice that you recommend of writing it down on paper forces you to articulate all of those different things, and it takes it out of just kind of a morass of feeling, this shapeless blob of feeling. It puts a shape on it, it puts boundaries to it, it forces you to identify it and look at it. And then usually that helps people say, oh, okay, this is the next thing I need to do. And like you said, that creates the action. And then you have a bit of dealing with overwhelm. Love it. See, language, it's all good.
Language.
Now, all of these, saying we need to change the way that we think or speak to ourselves or about ourselves, etc., is easier said than done, because language habits are really tough to change. You mentioned at the beginning that these are things that we grow up with throughout our life. We don't generally consciously think about them. We are rarely taught how to do this sort of vocabulary and self-talk work and everything else. So it's easier said than done. It can be a long road. What are some of the first steps that you personally recommend for people who are wanting to change the way that they use language, that they use self-talk, that they use their story? What are the first steps people need to take?
Broken record over here. Soft talk.
Yep.
Write down. So rewind and write out the soft talk keywords that we just mentioned 5 times larger than you normally write them on a clean sheet of paper. Why 5 times larger? Because your reticular activating system is going to go, hey, why am I writing these words 5 times larger than I normally write them? And the other party is going to go, don't worry about it, just pay attention to them. So it's going to get your attention. And everything starts with awareness. Once your awareness is raised, and take that piece of paper, it's called the Soft Talk Challenge. We've been running this thing for years. Put it up somewhere where you're going to see it for 7 days. 7 days is enough. So clean sheet of paper, write those words 5 times larger, take that paper, put it up for 7 days. And what's going to happen is you're going to start seeing these words more and more in your emails and your text messages, because that's where it's the easiest. Those are the 2 easiest places to identify, because you're staring at the words as opposed to hearing them or saying them, believing them. And you'll be writing an email and you're like, oh no, I'm going to take out that guess and that maybe.
Mm-hmm.
And your go from this to this, and you send it, and you get this much. Who likes an email that's 9 paragraphs long with 41 things that need? Nobody. What you want to do is, it's just as important, if not more important, than what you want, the, what you're trying to get done with the email. How easy is it to respond to your email? Okay. And if you want to make your life hard,
what do you need from me? Those are the 2 parts to an email.
Rocket science.
What do you want? What do you need from me? As the
Rocket
reader,
science.
that's what I'm looking at.
And it definitely helps to be to have an interest or an attraction to this work. Attraction is not a choice.
Mm-hmm.
You can't talk yourself into being attracted to someone, or talk yourself out of being attracted to someone, or something that you're interested in. Yeah, I'm going to go over there and I'm going to be interested about that. It's not how it happens. So having said that, if you're enjoying, and I'm assuming that you are, because you're listening to this podcast, okay, and I'm assuming you've also been listening to Lauren's other like the podcast. You're a consistent listener. Thank something somewhere for giving you an interest in something that will pay dividends now and the rest of your life, also known as making some seemingly minor adjustments in your everyday ordinary language. If you improve the story that you tell yourself, to yourself, about yourself, things are going to get better, including how you feel, including how you see yourself, including how you see the world, including how you breathe, including how you move. I mean, talk yourself into a bad mood and stay there, everybody.
It's very easy.
It's super easy, especially when you have no idea that you have another way of dialoguing with yourself.
Yeah.
Okay. Talk yourself into a good mood and stay there for a little while. And, your shoulders are back and you're like, hey, things are looking up. Get it?
Fantastic. Well, that's an awesome place to wrap up with. Talk yourself into a good mood. See what happens. Be grateful for the fact that you've got this tool, that you have language that can help you change your story and deal with the soft talk. Again, I will put all the words in the description below. Deal with those soft talk words, learn how to recognize them. And then once you recognize them, you can learn how to start selectively and consciously removing them. And then that becomes your habitual way of speaking. It's magic. It's abracadabra. As we wrap up, Mark, tell us about Enlifted.
Enlifted is so my business partner and I, we teamed up 7.5, 8 years ago, and we created a brand and an online course for the general audience. And then we went on a podcast once upon a time, the best podcast in the fitness industry. And that introduced us to some very interesting people. Fast forward through several quite magical interactions, and we now certify coaches. Okay, we're 2 weeks away from graduating our 250th level 1 coach. I'm the head coach. I'm one of the co-founders and head coach of Enlifted. I deliver all the trainings, and we certify coaches in how to dismantle the victim mentality for themselves and for their clients, using everyday ordinary language. And that's where that, and going on podcasts, that's where most of my professional hours reside.
That's where you are. Well, if people want to find more of you and more of your work, where's the best place for them to go?
Enlifted.me. Enlifted.me.
Beautiful.
Yeah, it's a good looking website too. My business partner, he's good on the design side of things.
I was on it. It's a pretty website. It's easy on the eyes.
Yeah.
Well, Mark, thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you everyone for hanging out, for having some language moments with us. Because if we all have more of these language moments, our communication will be better, our stories will be better, we'll all be a bit better for it. So thanks, Mark. Thanks everyone for listening. If you want to keep up with more discussions like this from people like Mark, who have an awful lot to say about really important parts of communication in work and in life, please head over to laurensergi.com, sign up in the pop-up, That way you will be on the newsletter and you will get these interviews the fastest. You'll get them first before anyone else, which is always lots of fun. Take care, everybody. Speak better. Remember, abracadabra. Work on your language, and I look forward to seeing you again on the next Talk Shop.